managing partner of Lerer Hippeau, media mogul, and future advisor to my company, Demo Day. Ben Lerer, dude, how's it going?
Doing well. I didn't know I just got a new job.
Well, congratulations on the new role.
Yeah, very excited.
I got a question for you, man. Is there any room for media in venture? I know recently you've been kind of pivoting away from focusing on media to more enterprise. Is there any space or room for media in the venture world?
So, look, when we got started, which is 13 or 14 years ago, there was a platform shift, right? I mean, sort of mobile. The mobile revolution was afoot, and there was a bunch of opportunity to do a bunch of different kinds of consumer investing, and media was a category that we did a bunch in and actually did really well in. A lot of challenges sort of presented themselves in the media business model broadly, much of it the product of social media and sort of the role that they played in the ecosystem and where ad dollars went and a bunch of other things. And the last several years, maybe 5, 6, 7 years, have been really tough for digital media, have been very hard, I think, to rationalize new money in from a VC perspective. I think a bunch of the exits that people were expecting didn't materialize. This happened in a bunch of industries, but media was one of them. For the first time in years and years and years, I am starting to get a little bit excited at sort of the fringes of media and MarTech and ad tech and areas of gaming and places that we've been pretty slow for a long time. And, the reasoning behind it is sort of, fortunately or unfortunately, AI. And I say unfortunately just because it's such a cliche VC, easy thing to point to. But I do really believe that the iPhone ushered in a generation of really exceptional companies, and we had a run of really interesting stuff that got built because of that shift in technology. And this is the next really great big platform opportunity from a tech perspective 15 years later. And there's going to be new interesting things that happen. It's very early. I'm not sure exactly where, but I'm spending a bunch of time at the consumer application layer, and media will be a part of that.
So I was going to ask, like with companies like myself, right, or even just news-focused media companies, what do they need to do? Do they need to pivot? Do they need to focus larger than just the news and storytelling and just reach to different, like the fringes you said of ad tech, MarTech, et cetera?
I think that it's very hard to generalize, and there's different, I'm on the board of Vox, and I think that, Vox has a bunch of scale and has a bunch of brands, and what Vox has the opportunity to do is going to be different than what you guys have the opportunity to do. I do think that figuring out how to turn, broadly AI into your friend and not your enemy is going to be a requirement. And I would say thinking beyond just, okay, cool, can I use generative AI to create content more cheaply and or do a game SEO differently. There's very small incremental improvements and maybe actually significant cost savings that can come with it. That's one version. I think a more interesting version is to think about is really to take your sort of consumer first brain and think about how you can deliver totally new kinds of experiences to consumers because of this new technology that's available to you. And that's really, really, really hard to do. It's harder for a company like Vox than it is for a company like yours, just based on bigger companies have more challenges in you're turning a battleship versus turning a motorcycle. But they also have more resources, and so
more connections, more everything.
And by the way, and more users and more data. And we do know that one of the interesting things about AI is, and we're seeing this with how much value is sort of inuring to the big traditional tech companies, is data is a really valuable asset to build interesting AI products and have a competitive advantage. And a bigger digital media company is going to have a lot more of that than a smaller one. And so, we can probably go offline and talk about this now that I'm a formal advisor. But I think that there is I think that you should, at the stage that you are at in your business,
Yep.
you've got to figure out how you just get really pumped about this technological shift versus consider this to be disruptive, because your business isn't so big that like you don't need to be afraid of disruption.
Right.
Like lean into it right now.
Absolutely. You mentioned cliches earlier. I'm curious, when you get pitched by a company, what's a cliche that you hear so often that kind of makes you cringe nowadays?
I mean, that's my job, man. I'm not sure if I'm delivering more cliches or they are at this point, but you know, one of the classics, and by the way, it's the funny thing is it's also true half the time, but like, you know, you don't know which half, is founders coming in and telling me that, you know, they're taking their time in their process, and it's all about picking the right partner, and basically to justify the fact that they have not figured out who their lead is yet. And you know, again, this is like not to knock, because I do think also probably they genuinely believe that they want to work with the best partner.
Right.
But I think that that is something that in 100% of meetings is said. And again, it's true, but it's always said.
You've had a lot of founders coming in and out of this, well, not this building, because this is new, so congratulations on the new building. You've had a lot of founders coming in and out of the doors of the Lerer Hippeau, like Casper, Allbirds, big companies, right? Who are some that have come through the door that you didn't close the deal on? Ones that maybe got away, if you're willing to mention some of those that you met with early on.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is there are more that got away than didn't.
For
if
sure.
You think about the sort of some of the cruel realities of this business. More often than not, the ones that got away because we were wrong, not because we weren't selected.
Like wrong on the
partner.
bet that you were thinking
We were
of.
wrong, like we passed incorrectly.
Got it.
Versus they chose to work with somebody else.
Got it.
Of course, you know, are we able to win every deal we want to win? No, but I think that, you know, at least in my stomach know that like my anti-portfolio is more a product of my own terrible decision making than something else. I'd say, look, there are limitless examples of this. Maybe one of the more painful ones was very, very early in my career was Harry's, the shaving company. And the reason it was painful is I knew Jeff and was friends with Jeff before. I had done a bunch of, you know, sort of good early consumer stuff. He was a co-founder at Warby, and we were already in Warby.
Right.
It was just like right there, so nicely, wonderfully in front of me. And I had a bunch of, now in retrospect, sort of incorrect assumptions and questions around the category, when I now know enough that this is not about the category as much as it is about the founder. I knew Jeff was so special and so wonderful and just like exactly the kind of person that we should be in business with. And I let other things sort of get in the way of my judgment.
Right.
And Jeff's still a good bud and a better bud today. And you know, but like, it's just a bummer that like, you know, you learn those lessons hopefully earlier in your career around what to prioritize. And that's one where, you know, I remember sitting there and being like hemming and hawing over very, very, very small things that in retrospect are totally meaningless.
Can I read you a quote that you had from a couple years ago with CNN?
Oh, God.
And this is a good one. It's not a bad one.
I mean,
they asked you, what worries you in life? Do you remember this question?
I ask myself every day.
It says, you said so much, just a lot of moving pieces between operating and investing and friends and family and health and global warming and gun control and Donald Trump. Lots of shit to worry about. Do those things still worry you today?
Of course.
Are there new worries in 2024? Or is it more the more things change, the more they stay the same?
That's a pretty good list. I mean, you know, maybe like
covered
add in AI and
about AI. What are you afraid of AI for?
Well, I mean, you know, there is,
sure.
you know, add in, you know, the flavors of the month, and unfortunately Donald Trump still remains on that list. But I think that probably where I am different today than I was then, and this is, you know, incrementally, is as I've gotten older, I've gotten slightly better at understanding what I can and can't control.
Yeah.
And frankly, understanding that I can't control much.
Personally and professionally?
Personally and professionally.
Okay.
And that I think probably then, and by the way, today and always for me, there are times where I do too much looking at other people and wondering what they're doing and how I could be doing something differently, and sort of comparing myself to others and seeing my own successes or failures maybe through other people's eyes. And as I get older and I'm sort of more comfortable with that idea and more cognizant of that and more aware of that, I have a little bit more control over some of those feelings and some of that FOMO. And then, the time not spent agonizing and worrying about those things, I'm able to put towards being present and be a better dad or be a better colleague or be a better partner or be a better child or whatever you want to be. And so, that these are the sort of small incremental maturations that, I think you go through. And I'm definitely at that age now, I'm 42, where I wake up, for every day as I'm sort of growing up, and you're setting your life up. You're like putting the pieces in place to one day live the life that you aspire to.
Right.
And one day you wake up and you just realize that, like, this is it. This is the life. Like, there's no such thing as setting it up. Like, this is the life. And I think having young kids is really, shines a light on that. And so I'm at that phase now where I'm trying to live more deliberately, more purposefully, and like do the things that I love, be with the people that give me energy, and all the things that don't, not just ignore them, but just not let them play such an active role in my mind.
Right. How has being a father changed the way that you either invest or work with portfolio companies, if at all?
I don't know that it necessarily. Look, I think there's something about being a father which is just.
You're more patient now with your portfolio
I'd like to
companies.
think I'm more patient. I'm not sure that my wife would agree with you, but I'm more. I think you learn some things about kindness as a parent, and you learn a lot about a lot about prioritization.
Yeah.
And so, I think that I bring that. I really value time more than I ever did before, and trying to optimize my time and also be incredibly respectful of the founder's time for the folks I work with. And I think be really respectful, not just in the micro of how we interact, but also the macro. This sometimes shows itself with companies where things aren't going well. And I've had some conversations in the last year that I don't know if I would have had in the past, where I can sit down with a founder and say, your time is more valuable than my money. It's really hard for you to recognize this where you are in the business because you are so deep. Yeah. And I've been there as a founder, but this isn't going to be what you want it to be. And so we can think about how we're going to make big changes to it, or we can think about how you don't have to do this anymore. Yeah. And those kinds of conversations are newer for me, and I don't think I would have had those until I had children.
Do you think New York will ever overtake San Francisco as the startup capital of the world?
I don't know ever.
Yeah.
Ever? Yeah. Ever, I do, because I think that New York is, just from sort of a cultural and I think New York has a lot of advantages over San Francisco on the whole. But I'm not talking in the next few years. I just think
later rather than sooner, maybe.
Yeah, okay. And I think New York was in position, not necessarily to sort of take that over, but to gain more ground more quickly before this most recent wave of AI. Okay. And I think a lot of this recent wave of AI, at least this first gen, is going to benefit big tech, and most of big tech is sort of centered out west. And so I think you've seen a little bit of a rebound for that market in the last few years. But I don't know why it really matters. Like New York bigger or San Francisco bigger, like it doesn't make any difference. New York has established itself as a wonderful place to build companies and a place that has all different kinds of interesting, diverse talent and can generate big returns for investors. And like, I no longer feel like we need to justify New York as a place to build great companies.
It just seems like VCs love debating the New York or Bay Area like over and over
VCs
every couple
have
years.
nothing else to talk about. We are, you know, I say this to LPs now, which is, you know, we used to be in a world where it's like, you should have a manager in New York. Now it's like, you should have, if you have a real strategy dedicated to deploying into venture capital, you should have a bunch of managers in New York. There's no
Not
such
just
thing
one.
as one fund that can cover the New York market for you. This is a very, very, very big, there is too much going on here for anyone to wrap their arms around entirely. And so I'm very long New York. I'm also very biased New York. I grew up in Manhattan. And
big Mets fan.
Big Mets fan. It's been a very unpleasant last few weeks.
That's my second favorite team.
What's your first favorite team?
I'm from Houston, so the team everyone loves the most in the MLB.
Yeah. You know,
the Astros.
Well, I don't hate I mean, I don't love the cheating scandal, but like, I don't hate the
cheating?
Astros. Yeah, well, let's not. But yeah, New York's, you know, New York's incredible. Come on.
Do you have a morning routine that you stick to pretty consistently?
Yeah, I mean,
Can you walk it out for me?
I mean, the core of my morning routine is I take my kids to school.
Okay.
So I take all three of my kids to school. We go together every morning, and it's like a 20 or 25 minute ride in the car, and I'm with them, and it's like my favorite time of the day, and also they're nuts. And we do something called Immaculate Grid, which is, do you know Immaculate Grid?
For the sports one or?
The sports one, where there's a grid of like 3 different teams or statistics by another 3.
Your
and
kids
you
know
have to
sports
match them
well
up.
enough to be able
My
to.
son, my 9-year-old, knows baseball well enough that he can contribute.
No way.
And I know
That's
a lot
impressive.
about baseball, and so we do that together every day. And then my 7-year-old son wants to do soccer, and we don't know anything about soccer.
Besides him or no one?
Nobody. He doesn't even know anything about soccer because, by the way, it's like 3rd division Europe, you know, Spanish league teams,
Exactly.
and we're like I don't.
You have to look up
His
every
name is
single
Mookie.
answer.
I'm like, Mooks, you know, and he's like, try Messi there. I'm like, I don't think that
This will
Messi,
not be Messi.
was
And
on.
it's every square he
is
asks.
from Africa and was on Dortmund, but I'm happy to fill that in. But we do that together, and then I bring those kids in and drop them off at school, and then some mornings I then work out and come in, and other mornings I just come straight in.
Got it.
And that's.
Is there coffee anywhere in there?
There's coffee on the way to school, and I have like.
You make it yourself, or you get it from
No,
somewhere?
I pick it up. It's like dialed in
What's
through
your
the
spot?
app. It's called Joe's. It's in Brooklyn near my house, and so. Like driving by, I jump out of the car for 10 seconds. It's like pre-made, ready. I grab it. And
Put the
get back
car
in
hazards
car.
on.
Just we have our formula. It's a very smooth maneuver.
The reason I ask is because I want to do a video of recreating a morning routine, but I don't have any kids myself, so
My
I can't
morning
do
routine
that
would
part.
not be very interesting, and I would not dare let you in and see what actually happens inside
Oh,
the house
no,
on the way
like,
out,
we'll
which
recreate
is
it in Austin, you know?
super
Just kids screaming,
ungraceful,
getting dressed.
where like, you know, every kid's got like their shoes on the wrong feet, and
sure.
like people have like already spilled enough stuff on their clothing that they have to change their entire outfit before they go to school.
Yeah.
And you know, that's 3 kids.
I'm a huge fan of Foxtrot. There's one in my neighborhood.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious either, you know, what happened to get to the point of where they had to close all their locations and then now reopening some of them.
Yeah. So the Foxtrot story is an unfortunate one and a frustrating one, and a lot of lessons learned for Mike, the founder. I think probably for a bunch of the investors around the table, certainly for me. And I'll give you the quick history on the investment, which is we wrote our first check into Foxtrot when they had, I think, 1 small store in Chicago.
Okay.
Maybe they had opened a second, but they were not the Foxtrot stores of today.
Right.
They're sort of like beautiful big corner lot, gorgeous locations. And I met Mike, and he raised a few $1 million at a single-digit valuation, and about half the volume of sales were coming through last mile delivery, sort of digital, and the other half were in store. And it was really early, but there was something special, and the brand was really appealing, and Mike wonderful.
Yeah.
And they operated the business really in a really disciplined, mature way. And actually, when we sort of underwrote the deal, one of the things I liked was that Mike was based in Chicago and didn't have the sort of like coastal influence of grow at all costs.
Sure.
And I thought that they were going to maybe take the path less traveled, but over time create a bunch of value. And so meticulously went and stood up stores and got a store to profitability and then opened the next and did things in a sort of orderly, mature, disciplined way. And the business started to grow and get really exciting. The venture market started to get hot and people wanted to be around big, sexy assets, and everything felt like they were going up and to the right. And in 21, they raised one of the sort of big proverbial, very expensive $100 million rounds from a crossover investor who hadn't done a lot of venture sort of traditionally.
Yep.
And we knew it was sort of, on the one hand, it was dangerous for the business to suddenly have access to that kind of money after they had But
it's tough to say no to that much.
But it's hard to say
capital.
no. And by the way, I think probably the answer is you take it, but you don't spend it. And
I
the
thought that's
reality
even
is,
harder.
and it's really hard to do. And I think that the reality is, most folks can't control themselves. And by the way, the new investors who put the money in certainly aren't looking for you to create a nest egg for your business.
Yeah.
They're looking for you to put the money to work and achieve hyper growth. And the model was one that had repeatability, and there was the idea of a land grab. And by the way, COVID, there was a reason to go and pick up spaces because rents were really low.
Yeah.
And so there was like a rationale behind doing it. And they opened a bunch of stores really quickly. Store build outs became more expensive because of the COVID supply chain issues. And to support a bunch of stores, you build a bunch of central operating infrastructure, including things like central kitchens to do prepared foods and things that, boom time decisions that are not independently irresponsible or bad decisions. They're done from the right place. They're trying to find better margin over time or take advantage of a real estate, a specialized real estate market, whatever it is.
Right.
But when you add up a bunch of them with a team that hadn't managed that kind of money and that didn't have the kind of financial controls in place to sort of manage it, they started spending too hot, and some parts of the business started to shake, and it was a bit too late to change some of the sort of underlying cost infrastructure in the business.
Yeah.
And in these four-wall businesses, you have leases, you have lease obligations, you can't just go, I want to cut my team. You're a software company. I have to bite it on, sort of like take a hard write-off of a severance and deliver some really hard and horrible news to people, but then you have a new right-sized business.
Yeah.
This is
clean cut in those scenarios.
There's no clean cut when you have the kinds of physical spaces.
Yeah.
And so they were in the situation that I think a bunch of companies get in, which is, okay, we can cut and we can be shrinking and have no path to capitalization in the future, to raising more money.
Yeah.
And or so I think founders get in their head, but the reality is that may not always be the case, but you get that in your head.
Sure.
We'll never be able to raise money again. And in this business, we need capital because we need to open new stores.
Yeah, and you're burning
if you're
so
not
much money.
growing, you're dying.
Right.
And so you get into are we going to grow our way out of this, or are we going to cut our way out of it? And Foxtrot's an example of a company that sort of picked both.
Damn.
Right? You're going to grow your way out in some places, you're going to cut your way out in others, and you end up with like the worst of both worlds.
Yeah.
And it's no individual's fault. It's no individual investor's fault. I do think it is largely the fault of the VC ecosystem to overfinance companies before they're ready. It sucks, and it sucks for the team, and it sucks for the investors, and the only thing that you can take, and so now I'm not sure who's opening the new stores or what that all looks like, but it's a very bad outcome for everybody else, and I'm not sure how else to think of it other than there's a lot of learnings, and if you internalize them, you're going to be better. I'm going to be a better investor because of the experience. Mike's going to be a better operator because of the experience. And I'm sure a bunch of other people around the table are going to use this to learn. Yeah. And it's the only way that I can stomach something that feels so avoidable and unfortunate is to chalk it up to a mistake that won't be made again.
Yeah.
And that's really all there is to it.
And it seems like, though, these stores some of them are reopening.
They will reopen. By the way, it's a brand that people want to
That's
exist.
what I'm saying. People are really excited about all that stuff. I've seen a ton of news. Like, I'm so excited to get back in my community. What piece of advice, though, would you give, Mike and the other team, like the leadership team, now that I'm not sure if this is like a second wave of Foxtrot, but this new, path, right?
I have to imagine that the way that this will get run is just, I don't think I need to give them any advice. Sure. I think probably the advice will be internalized, and I'm sure the new money in will give the advice differently than I will. I'm sure the business is just going to be run differently, and it's not going to be run for, software venture outcome. Yeah. It's going to be run for, secure, IRR, safe, responsible growth type outcome, I imagine. And who knows, in a few years maybe they regain some of the magic and the posture changes and they want to go and capitalize the business and go for it again in some way. But it's going to be a different group of folks that are going to sort of be on that journey.
Ben Lerer,
Dude.
Appreciate it, man. Lerer Hippeau, media mogul, goat of New York City. Appreciate it, Ben.
Thanks, dude.